No, my name's Adam Malofsky, and I'm a creative guy, and I guess I went to a private high school in Hartford, Connecticut, and I was an artist, and I like to be creative. I played some sports, and when I went to college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but when I took chemistry classes, I never had to try. I don't know why. My father was a PhD chemist, but everything else I had to kind of work my butt off, and when I took chemistry, I just got A's, and I don't know why. So I said, all right, what's this worth? And so I was in high school, getting to be junior, senior, I started to look at careers in chemistry. I knew I really liked business, but I had found that a lot of the people who were advising me, who worked with my dad or for my dad or above my dad, who are in the chemical industry, Loctite Corporation said, you really need to pick some specific scientific discipline if you're going to be in the science industry. And so when I looked at chemists, they got paid almost nothing. Chemical engineers got paid like 50% more money, so that was an easy decision. They told me chemical engineers were much more practical. Chemists came up with things you could never actually make for real, or that involved deadly things, explosions, fires, all kinds of things, poisons. Chemical engineers learned how to say, no, we're not going to do that. And so I went the chemical engineering route and started to look for schools that did that, got into a top 10 program at the time, which was Lehigh University. Got my bachelor's degree there and minored in Middle Eastern Studies because I wanted to know about the world, and I was very interested in all the tumult in the Middle East, so I learned the history of every single country there, so that was kind of cool. And when I was done with my bachelor's degree, or getting to the end, I actually was focusing. Also, I'd taken a bunch of business courses, but I also took a bunch of polymer courses. I had some AP credits, so I was ahead, and then I went to the University of Connecticut, which was a top 5 polymer program at the time. I think it's still in the top 10. To get my PhD, I found out if you got a master's degree, technically, you had to pay to go to school, but if you got a PhD, they paid you to go to school and gave you a free master's degree after you passed your PhD exam. So I found it amusing to be sitting in classes with kids who are actually paying for their masters and then paying for me to sit there next to them. They would figure this out about a month in and get really pissed off. Because what a lot of PhD students did is they quit after they got their free masters. And they got paid like 20 grand a year to get their master's degree. That sounds kind of cool, right? So while I did that, I actually wrote my own grants as my first taste a little bit of entrepreneurship, while also through college and graduate school, I did basically a co-op or internships continuously at Loctite Corporation. I worked in product development, technical service, the pilot plant, production management, and got to support some sales to some degree. So over about a 6-year period, I learned a tremendous amount through the 2 years of graduate school. And got a real good feel, started to learn about business. Loctite, which you guys probably don't know much about, was one of the single most profitable companies of the 20th century. And in the chemical industry, it was the most profitable. So they made 50% pre-tax profit for 27 consecutive years on 15 to 20% earnings and sales growth every year and almost every quarter. So being able to be around those people, my father was one of the core group, but the 20 other guys and gals that did that was pretty phenomenal to be able to do something like that. And so when I went to get my PhD, I also had enough credit that I started to get my MBA at the University of Connecticut, but I did a bunch of weird things then. I went to culinary school because I was so far ahead I ran out of classes to take. So my advisor said that was chemistry because he liked when I cooked for the group that I was in. And I was really skinny then. I'm not skinny anymore. I weighed 130 pounds. I gained 125 pounds weightlifting and running. So my wife says now I went from this to this. Now I'm back to this. But I was creative, so I liked the cooking, I liked the chemistry, I liked creating in business. Took the cooking classes. I even got involved heavily in politics for a good while. I was even a press secretary my senior year in high school. There you created, molded, and shaped minds. So I like doing those kinds of things. But I also learned I like being holistic. I didn't want to just do chemistry and be a chemist in the lab. I also didn't just want to be a marketing guy. I like putting it all together. So I knew eventually I wanted to run a company. So as I was putting these degrees together, even all the way back in high school and with all the help I got from Loctite, I basically was charting, if I'm in the chemical or manufacturing industry, what do CEOs look like? What do their backgrounds generally look like? And generally, the more degrees you piled up and the longer you went to school and the more diverse your background, the more diverse roles you had, the more empathy you developed, the more you played up and down the supply chain, the more likely you would have that would happen to you. I also liked entrepreneurship a tremendous amount, studied it, read a lot about it. And even the business, the first job I had was in an entrepreneurial environment. I met a gentleman, Steve Levin, who Ben, I've told you about, who's a local entrepreneur here in Cincinnati. He started 12 companies of his own. Well, 12 companies, 3 for GE, 2 for Procter & Gamble, and then the rest on his own. So I don't know if you ever heard of Vocal Point or Tremor. Okay, they were folded back into P&G, viral marketing companies. But he started those 2 companies for Procter & Gamble and ran them until they folded them back in. He and I met, found out that everything we were doing, what became this holistic approach to looking at the world and where its trends were. Not just the trends globally, but regionally. So regionally within the United States, what's going on in South America, what's going on in Africa, what's going on in Northern Africa, what's going on in Southeast Asia, what's going on in China, socio-politically, environmentally, technologically, and starting to look for trajectories and where things are going. And suddenly watching where those intersections, what they were with what people needed at the time. Started studying a lot of famous people like Ari Douglas, Clayton Christensen, Stephen Johnson, and others. And suddenly realized we had this thing that we call adaptive innovation, which is a holistic approach to innovating that links to basically breakthroughs. Significant breakthroughs and how they're done. And whether it was Thomas Edison all the way through to Steve Jobs, they did it the same. It wasn't any different. It was just how they looked at the world and their life. And so we consult with companies, but we also did a startup. So in the middle of all the stuff we did, and we actually worked to do that with Georgia Tech, TUE in the Netherlands. That's a university in the Netherlands, Technical University at Eindhoven, University of India that I cannot pronounce, so I don't try. But it's a big university in India. And we came up with this thing called adaptive innovation. We actually then applied adaptive innovation to a few big opportunities. We were looking at energy, and people say we're going to run out of energy. And then we looked at materials, because if you're going to run out of the materials for energy, maybe you'd run out of stuff to make materials. And it was interesting, that's when we started to say truth means a lot. So there's lots of people who use politics to juxtaposition things to make money off it. And we found out that there was no energy crisis. And we met with the Department of Energy and the U.S. Geological Survey, and this was both under Bush and under Obama, all right? And they were kind of like, well, there's really no energy crisis. There's actually like 400 or 500 years worth of oil left, even with the economy growing. And we're like, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He says, look, if oil prices go up, they already know where the oil is and how much it'll cost to get it. Every time it goes up $10, we go after more oil. So like today, you have fracking. Why did fracking stop? Because the price went down. Well, when they first started doing fracking, that's when fracking realized was done in the 1880s, 1890s. It's not new. It's safe. It's been there a long time. But when they got to a point where oil was at that $150, $125 a barrel, suddenly fracking made sense. But then they learned how to do it. And then it made sense at 50. And then suddenly there's all this oil. Well, what happened? You have the oil market crash, right? But now it's crashed down to the 20s. Why are the Saudis leaving it in the $35, $38, $40 range? It's just below the number that fracking guys and other ways to get oil make sense. The Saudis don't want anyone doing that. They'll do it if they get to buy the fracking guys, but that's not been going very well for them right now. But we started to look at what truth was, right? And so I actually, at that time, the reason I was salient is we were looking to create a startup. We suddenly said, there's a big ball of fire out there. It makes lots of energy. It's not going to run out for 5 billion years. And 2 billion years from now, we're going to go red giant and I'll get burned to a crisp anyway. So we're not going to worry about that. Whether it's solar, wind, whatever, there's plenty of energy. It's just what you're going to pay for it, okay? And then every time it's expensive, all that's going to happen is you're going to learn how to do it better and it'll probably still come down. So he said, that doesn't look very interesting. But materials sounded interesting, and the way you assemble things sounded interesting, and that's where we came across Sirrus. And there, formerly Bioformix, we came across a technology where we were looking at a number of trends. And one of them was people wanted to eliminate, this is how simple this gets, they wanted to eliminate energy from manufacturing. Now, at first you say that kind of sounds obvious, but it's not inherently obvious what it means. If I can eliminate energy, it means I might eliminate heat. If I can eliminate heat, I can use lots of materials that are usually less expensive that are heat sensitive. But now if I don't have to heat them, right? And you go, what does that mean? In an automotive plant, I know the CTO of General Motors, in an automotive plant, you guys probably don't know much about how cars are built, but 50% of an automotive plant's build cost and operating cost is painting the car. It's a mile-long oven. A mile. 5,000 feet at 300, 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Recycling all the solvents, doing all this stuff. Do you think plastic parts can go through that oven? Nope. Only few things can go through that oven. So then they have a whole separate system for coating plastic parts, and it's usually actually appliques. 3M makes these appliques that are very carefully, usually hand applied on all these auto parts. It's nuts. So theoretically, if we could eliminate the heat process for painting a car and for bonding lots of pieces together, it would change the way a car could be built, designed, look forever. If you did the same with cans, well, you could get rid of BPA, but as it turned out, BPA isn't actually really an issue, but the media certainly made it into one hell of an issue, and who wants to take a chance, right?
What's BPA?
BPA, bisphenol A. So it's a chemical structure that if you take a rat and like shove, basically the equivalent of the body weight of that material into the rat, it will get cancer. It'll also die from choking, all right? You have to be very careful when people tell you things are bad for you, right? Because half the time you go look and you go, how much did they feed Mr. Rat? Oh my God. No wonder Mr. Rat looks bloated. It's like no person would eat that much. You know what I'm saying? And there's lots of other little things that go on in the industry. Like one of the subtleties is in an apple there's arsenic. So 40 years ago, no one could detect there was arsenic in the apple for the level it was at. So the EPA would say, no arsenic in apples, right? Realize arsenic naturally occurs in apples. It's part of the process of how the apple becomes an apple. Well, the equipment gets better and better and better and better until about 20 years ago they were like, oh my God, there's parts per like trillion or billion of arsenic. We have to ban all the apples. It's like, oh my God, it's like, no. But the public doesn't know that, right? They just would tell you on the news, there's arsenic in all our apples. It's probably the chemical industry. The apple does that for God knows what reason, but it's been in apples since the beginning of time. So when we look at things like this, in the can industry, it turned out we could eliminate BPA, and that's why we went to talk to them where I first came across this technology that fit these big trends of no heat, no solvent, do things faster, try to find ways to use less expensive, more sustainable, renewable materials, whatever. And they were like, yeah, BPA is a bunch of BS. Well, when they make us do it, we'll do it. But what goes wrong with using the BPA epoxies is that we have to use a 500-foot long oven for a Coke can. They're like, that's half of our cost, and it makes us that we can't decorate the can with all this cool stuff we'd love to do with the can to attract young people like you guys to, drink things that are ultra loaded with super caffeine so you can study for exams, okay? So they want like blinking cans and glowing cans, and for you guys, cans with like the bikini disappears or something, and maybe it's a hot fireman or something on your can, I don't know. But the bottom line is they have all these ideas, they can't do them, all right? They can't do them. And so we went in and showed them with some little bit of material they could do it, and they just went crazy, right? So we knew we had a need. It made financial sense, the financial model, all this other stuff. And now that's one of the things we also learned is you want to go after things where there's a powerful, compelling need. If you find yourself and you have some idea, and you're having to find 20 ways it's different, it's a bad idea. If you can save someone an order of magnitude or a half order of magnitude in cost and profitability, people will pay attention to you. If you can't do that, they will not pay attention to you. It's just not going to happen. If you go to your boss with ideas that are incremental but involve huge effort, not good. So then that came up with some other axioms. One was the rule of tens. We learned doing the startup Sirrus and we had learned it before, but we applied it to creating Sirrus. When you go talk to someone, if you can't improve their profitability by 10% or more, and if it's industrial, their customers' profitability by 10% or more, you're not going to get anywhere probably. It's just not going to happen, okay? So there's one axiom. The next axiom is everything you do should cost, the risk should be inversely proportional to the cost. So you don't have some big challenge and say that means I need to spend millions. Instead, I've got a big challenge. Can I find inventions where other people have solved pieces of the problem, the what must be truths of the problem in adaptive innovation? And if I can find those what must be truths or put signposts out to look for them, then it means that these things already exist. I can deploy them pretty rapidly. I can deploy them pretty quickly and not spend lots of money. When you find out then if you have a fundamental discovery, that's in the peer review of universities or mega giant companies, government think tanks, okay? So these are the kind of things we started to learn. Sirrus was a big success. Sirrus today, I don't know if I'll make money. I mean, if you guys have studied entrepreneurship, I have to overcome a 3x return and an 8% accumulating note over ultimately 6-7 years. So if this thing sells for 200 million or more, I'll make money. If it doesn't, I don't make any. That's just the way it is. That's nothing I can do about it. But the technology works beautifully, and we have $1.5 trillion in annual revenue companies either invested in what we're doing or have partnered with us. That's an unbelievable number. We just got a phone call from a big computing company that uses a fruit as its symbol. We'll leave it at that. It's not the pear company. And that's exciting, right? It'll revolutionize medicine, do all kinds of fun things. And what's also interesting is when you do things like that, it makes sense. When it makes sense, people want to do it. So you guys, I'm sure, hear and listen, and I don't know how, since UC is not like the most activist campus, right? I mean, it seems kind of quiet. All right, it's not Brown University or Missouri or something crazy, right? Or University of Tennessee, where they're having this week Sex Week. If you guys want to get down there, there's still a few days left. It's really actually kind of insane. I was there. It was really weird. I didn't have any participation in it whatsoever. But what I'm saying is when you see things on the news that sound extreme, they're probably not true. And that goes both directions, whether right or left, whether there's absolutely no climate change or we're going to burn up and all die. When you hear people say stuff like that, it's frickin' crazy. It's probably politically motivated. It's not real. There's someone making money off it. Al Gore didn't make a few $100 million for nothing. He works for one of the biggest venture capital firms. He has every interest for all the investments he started to want the world to burn up, okay? And it's not happening, okay? But he already made the few $100 million, so he doesn't care. All right, and then there's people who go to the other extreme. There's no change. Of course, there's always changing climate, right? And that's where you see these trends. So like a new one, I told you a few about the ones we were tracking. One of the biggest new trends that people are paying attention to is called resiliency. So whether you believe in climate change or you don't believe in climate change, if the strongest hurricanes or storms you've ever had still occurred in the 1930s. If you ever type in hurricane 1930s Texas, it's like Texas was wiped off the map 2 or 3 times. I mean, just gone, tens of thousands of people killed. All right, they think 1,000 people or a few hundred people got killed at Katrina, right? That it's the disaster of all time. No, it's not even close. But what's different about our world than it was 100 years ago? We have computers. We have wires everywhere. We have data in clouds. We have people in hospitals that back then, they were in the hospital. You put some gasoline in a generator and the light went back on. You could take care of them. Now if it goes down and you're hooked up to 30 different things, you're probably going to die, right? Your communication systems go down. So what's happened is in our ever more complex world, which strikingly is actually more fragile than ever, right? It was actually easier to have building. I mean, it built a pyramid, it stayed there. Okay, you made a church out of a bunch of rocks, it kind of stayed there. You make it out of flimsy, metal 2x4s and some brick fascia. When the tornado comes, it's gone. Okay, it's gone. It doesn't have to be a mobile home. So resilience is actually a big thing now in industry, and a big thing now by governments, and a big thing now in even how you make a computer, a TV, your information system, everything. Because if there's a disaster, whatever disaster means, it could be weather, it could be a political event, a revolution, are all these things going to keep going? Right? Are they going to keep running? What's going to happen? And so there's always opportunities to make money on those kinds of things. So there's a clear need by the consumer where you can clearly measure whether or not something will be beneficial or not. And so I've spent my career doing those kinds of things. I've enjoyed doing all that kind of stuff. And now I'm starting 2 other companies, maybe a third. Some now are in software, some are still in materials. We're taking the consultancy we had before and transforming it with a new name, Elements Advisors. Probably be the name for the big, I'm doing it now, but for the bigger form, where we're going to take this holistic consulting to another level and help small to mid-sized companies as well as large companies. We're also going to be working with, I just met with the Department of Economic Development for Cincinnati. We want to take some of our time and give it back to helping people who are running businesses, say in Avondale or downtown Cincinnati or Appalachia or wherever it is that people are in need and can't afford to do these kind of things, to help them to advance themselves. Because the best thing you can do for people is help them be independent. If you just give them stuff, it just doesn't work. It just never works. I mean, you can do it in a company. Someday you have kids, if you want to experiment and have twins, give one twin everything. And the other twin has to like go through a rat maze to get stuff like food. And you'll find that the person, you'll find this in your life when you meet people, you do business, the ones who've suffered the most are the ones who are the most successful. The ones who suffered the most, had to work the hardest, do the best. And so when you come up with services for businesses, when you come up with ideas for businesses, there's lots of reasons to do things properly. And if you serve what humankind is looking for, they just want to live their life, enjoy their life, do positive things, right? Take care of their families, their friends, their children, their parents, their communities. Good things will happen. If you fight that, it won't happen.